production. If you would like our free resource catalog, or audio tapes in this series, or videotapes of the debates, call us at area code 512-346-6771, or write to Peaceway Productions, P.O. Box 9064, Austin, Texas 78766. We hope that you will find these debates informative.
Welcome. My name is Mark Gunning, and I'm the moderator for today's debate. I think you will find this debate to be very interesting and very important. The thesis for today's debate is the Catholic teaching on the infallibility of the Pope is unsustainable in light of the Bible and church history. Allow me to briefly introduce our speakers. James White is the director of Alpha and Omega Ministries. James holds a bachelor's degree in Bible and a master's degree in theology. He is the author of 7 books, including works on Roman Catholicism, Mormonism, the translation and text of the Bible, and Christian theology. He has had the privilege of serving as a professor of church history and an instructor in biblical Greek. He is an ordained Baptist minister. He is married to Kelly and has 2 children, Joshua and Summer Marie. Dr. Robert Fastigi holds a PhD in theology from Fordham University in New York. He is an associate professor of religious studies at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, where he has taught since 1985. Dr. Fastigi and his wife Kathy have 2 children and are expecting their 3rd. Our debate today will be strictly timed and organized so as to ensure fairness. Both speakers will give 15-minute opening statements followed by 4-minute rebuttals. Then there will be a period of question and answer, which will be followed by 5-minute closing statements. With that, let us begin. James?
Thank you very much. Princeton theologian Charles Hodge wrote regarding papal infallibility, quote, "There is something simple and grand in this theory. It is wonderfully adapted to the tastes and wants of men. It relieves them of personal responsibility. Everything is decided for them. Their salvation is secured by merely submitting to be saved by an infallible, sin-pardoning, and grace-imparting church. If any in their sluggishness are disposed to think that a perpetual body of infallible teachers would be a blessing, all must admit that the assumption of infallibility by the ignorant, the erring, and the wicked must be an evil inconceivably great. The Romish theory, if true, might be a blessing. If false, it must be an awful curse." End quote. And while it is certainly not politically correct, Philip Schaff, the great church historian of the past century, wrote concerning the developments in Roman Catholic theology that were current in his day, quote, "The sinlessness of the Virgin Mary and the personal infallibility of the Pope are the characteristic dogmas of modern Romanism, the 2 test dogmas which must decide the ultimate fate of this system. Both were enacted under the same Pope, and both faithfully reflect his character. Both have the advantage of logical consistency from certain premises, and seem to be the very perfection of the Romish form of piety and the Romish principle of authority. Both rest on pious fiction and fraud. Both present a refined idolatry by clothing a pure, humble woman and a mortal, sinful man with divine attributes. The dogma of the Immaculate Conception, which exempts the Virgin Mary from sin and guilt, perverts Christianism into Marianism. The dogma of infallibility, which exempts the Bishop of Rome from error, resolves Catholicism into papalism or the Church into the Pope. The worship of a woman is virtually a substitute for the worship of Christ, and a man-god in Rome for the God-man in heaven. This is a severe judgment, but a closer examination will sustain it. Every Catholic may hereafter say, 'I believe,' not because Christ or the Bible or the Church, but because the infallible Pope has so declared and commanded. On the other hand, if the dogma is false, it involves a blasphemous assumption and makes the nearest approach to the fulfillment of St. Paul's prophecy of the man of sin who, as God, sitteth in the temple, showing himself off that he is God, 2 Thessalonians 2:4, end quote. The thesis of our debate today is the Catholic teaching on the infallibility of the Pope is unsustainable in the light of the Bible and church history. Now, given our time constraints, I must honestly say that even if I had the entire 90 minutes, our time to do nothing just to present my case, I would fail to do justice to the information, both biblical and historical, that demonstrates the truth of our thesis today. Now, to sustain my defense of the thesis statement, I propose to do the following things. First, I shall demonstrate that papal infallibility is inconsistent with the Bible in 2 ways. First, by asserting that the Bible knows nothing of a papacy at all, and, hence, must know nothing of the infallibility of a mythical office and a mythical office holder. Second, I shall, for the sake of argument, examine Peter, who was hardly a pope, but who is claimed to be one by Rome, and shall demonstrate that he failed to walk in accordance with the truth of the gospel at Antioch, and hence had to be rebuked by the Apostle Paul. Secondly, I shall demonstrate that papal infallibility is inconsistent with church history, again in two ways. First, by demonstrating that the early church knew nothing of the papacy to begin with, and hence obviously knew nothing of papal infallibility. And secondly, that popes such as Liberius and Honorius did indeed teach falsehood in their office as Bishop of Rome. Now, when we turn to the Bible, first we find out that Peter is never viewed by the New Testament as a pope. While he is the leader of the disciple band, he is not the head of the church, and in fact gives way to other leaders such as James in the early church. Luke chapter 22, verses 24 through 30 shows us that even on the night of Christ's betrayal, the disciples argued over who would be the greatest, demonstrating that they did not understand the words of Matthew 16, 18 through 19 as establishing Peter as their head, but they did not find anything else in the words of Jesus that gave Peter any kind of supremacy either. Peter never gives us the slightest evidence that he viewed himself as a pope or the head of the church. Instead, he viewed himself as a fellow elder, not as vicar of Christ on earth. Acts shows Peter as a leader, but not a pope, and that at the beginning of the ministry of the church only. Acts chapter 11, Peter is called to give an account for his actions in the house of Cornelius, and in doing so, he gives not the slightest hint that he is functioning as the vicar of Christ on earth. As time goes on, Peter fades from view and others take the center stage. Paul's epistles not only do not give us any evidence of the papacy, they give us a great reason for rejecting the entire concept. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 11:28 that the care of all the churches was upon him